I mean, it's strange for us both to be running in this contest, and I thought long and hard about it, but I thought it was the right thing to do. I take my responsibility. Do we care about the gap between rich and poor in this society? I've got about 110. I feel I've got something to say. I'm not embarrassed to say that. I do care about that, but clearly it wasn't good enough. Get out of the Westminster bubble. I don't understand the question. And I laid out a plan for our future. A very clear plan for our future. And what I laid out yesterday, now we've got to get that down, and what I laid out yesterday, rich people at the top, a very clear plan for our future. Well, I think we had a good manifesto, but I'm not going to dump on rich people at the top. I haven't said we need higher taxes. Can this country work? I think that is the biggest question, that is the election question.
The coalition was formed between the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats with one specific purpose. That was to eliminate the deficit by the time of the 2015 general election. It is still running at 90 billion sterling every year, but perhaps even more sobering is the thought that when George Osborne became Chancellor of the Exchequer, our national debt was 850 billion. It is now 1.5 trillion. And yet, I didn't hear any apologies from the coalition or from the Chancellor, and I didn't see Labour really counter-attacking properly, perhaps because their own record in government was so woeful. And the point about those who are feeling good about life economically is that this is a London-led and an asset-led recovery. If you own stocks and shares, if you own substantial property, I accept that this government's policies have not been bad for you.
Well, what about the deficit?
The deficit is an important issue.
Well, you forgot to mention it.
Well, I said that we were not...
That's the second time, 2 days running.
Well, I said that we were not going to fund our additional plans on the NHS through higher borrowing. I talk a lot about the deficit.
Nobody's talking about borrowing. Everybody's talking about paying off this appalling deficit and debt.
Yeah, and what I laid out yesterday was a plan for the future.
Which excluded the deficit.
Which doesn't require higher borrowing.
No, it did not mention the deficit, which is surely the most important thing of all. You did not mention it. That is the essence of our economic crisis.
Well, I don't actually agree with... Well, I certainly don't agree with you that it is the essence of our economic crisis. The essence of our economic crisis was a global financial crash. The Tories definitely say...
In which the Labour government played a major role.
The Tories say, John, but one of the questions of this...
How could you present a job application, which is what you described your speech as being, without setting out the backdrop against which you were going to have to take up the job?
Two things. One, I think it did set out the backdrop.
You didn't mention the deficit.
Because actually the way I was explaining the way we would meet our plans was not on the basis of higher borrowing. But look, secondly...
But you've been candid. You forgot. How could you forget something so cardinal to the building of your case?
All I say is that I prepare speeches in advance and then I go and deliver them without notes. Now, sometimes you miss bits out, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you add sections of the speech. I've been pretty clear about our case on the deficit. Ed Balls couldn't have been...
notes business is a stunt.
I don't actually see it that way. I actually think
how do you see leaving out the deficit? You just tell us how you see that.
The way I see it is, I think that what I've been able to do in the last 3 conference speeches is speak to people directly about what I care about. And that's what yesterday was about. I think that is the biggest question, that is the election question.
Well, I can't pretend I'm not nervous. My worry is this, that having done a bit of practice and a bit of thinking about it, is I hope the public won't feel shortchanged. It looks like we might only get through 8 questions in 90 minutes. And I do public meetings around the country. I've done 72 of these Cameron Direct public meetings. I try and get through 25 questions in an hour. And I do worry that we may have ended up with a format that's going to be a bit slow and sluggish. So I may be wrong, but I think we've got to make sure the public feel they're getting their questions answered.